you. Starting my timer. We'll have time for questions, so we will make sure we don't use up all of the time with us chatting. But thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about this little-known topic, artificial intelligence, and how it's impacting investment and how companies are leveraging AI to scale. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Can I just get a show of hands of how many in the room are investors? Investors, okay. And founders? Oh, okay, we've got a very good mix here. Excellent. Well, we're going to really tailor our conversation to both audiences, and we'll ensure that hopefully you walk away with some new insights and ideas. As was mentioned, I'm Patricia Nielsen. I'm the head of startups for AWS Canada. For those that don't know, AWS is Amazon's web services business. It's the infrastructure side, so it's not e-commerce. It was a startup that actually came out of our e-commerce business. As Amazon was building the e-commerce platform, there was a realization that the technology being used could actually be scaled and could be made accessible for other companies to use and leverage, and so that's what happened. And since then, we've helped about 280,000 startups, and we've invested $6 billion in AWS credits to help startups get going. And I have the privilege of leading the Canadian business, and through that role, I get to work with incredible companies like ODAIA and BrainBox AI. And so thank you, Helen and Jean-Simon, for joining me in this conversation today.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so I will dive right in with a question to have both of you kind of introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about, perhaps Helen, you starting your role in co-founding ODAIA, a pharmaceutical tech company, and also the work that you've been doing at the University of Toronto.
Yeah, so I'm Helen Kontozopoulos, the co-founder of ODAIA.ai. For the last 11 years, I've been teaching at the University of Toronto in computer science. So I teach product development, design, and entrepreneurship. And through some amazing work that my co-founder Pericles Andritsos was working on process mining, machine learning, and understanding customers, we were able to get a pilot with the pharmaceutical industry understanding a doctor journey. And why a doctor journey is because there's a therapeutic need by, of course, a patient, but understanding that journey of a therapy to a patient. So we're in the sales enablement side of pharma, and right now we're a Series B team. We're about 100 people, and we're growing, and we're based here in Canada, across Canada. So our team is across Canada and also in the States. So as a growing team, it's pretty exciting. Being a professor at the university is pretty awesome. I love my students, being in computer science, and I'm always thinking about how to help and grow teams out of my course, but also just in the ecosystem and transferring companies out of kind of an academic setting, but also encouraging our students to develop startups, or our professors. Like one example is Blue Jay Legal, supporting a professor to commercialize. So I kind of, that work that I do at a university, but also the work that I do as a founder, but also I'm an LP in 3 funds, one in Europe and 2 here, Northside Ventures, I don't know if Alex is around, and another one is the Phoenix Fire with Danielle, I know she's around, and one Genesis Ventures in Greece. So supporting growing economies is really important to me. So that's kind of what I do.
Touching on all the different things.
Time.
Entrepreneurial side,
and as an angel investor.
As an angel investor,
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, and Jean-Simon, can you tell everyone a little bit about BrainBox AI and the autonomous AI you've developed, and now Gen AI?
So yeah, BrainBox is kind of an idea of combining predictive AI with operational research, so optimization, combining the 2 science together, so we could increase the productivity of some asset. And we're focusing really on the building energy, so this would be a great example. Unfortunately, we're not modulating this building, but really what we're doing is we're using the predictive AI to flip the building from a reactive mode to predictive mode, so we could find the right strategy to operate the building in real time. So the autonomous car, we're doing kind of the autonomous building, but just for the heating, cooling, and ventilation part of it. So deploying about more than 6,000 buildings in the world, shaving between 20 to 25% of the energy. But what's quite interesting, because it's kind of using operational research, multi-objective optimization, big words, but basically what it does, it tries to optimize several things at the same time. And it's a technique that we took from the video game, right? So the video game, there's several ways to win a game. So there's multiple objectives, and if you're wise and you play your card accordingly, you're going to win the game because you are getting the maximum bonus and the minimum penalty in a given time. So it's a bit the same thing when you're operating a building. We're doing that multiple objective, and we're saving that 20 to 25% in energy, but what's quite interesting is we go save about 40% on the emission side, which is that double barrel objective optimization. So customers are basically getting a big boost in productivity increase, if you want, in terms of how much does it cost you to operate that building. And at the same time, you're kind of saving the planet as a byproduct. So quite interesting.
That's cool.
Amazing. So when I think about AI, and you've both spoken about your journeys and the companies, these weren't developed yesterday or last week or in the last couple of months. These have been multi-year journeys. And when I think about AI, I think about even back, looking at Amazon.com recommendations. That's an AI-driven thing that we've all been benefiting from. Other people like you also liked this product or book. You might be interested. That's an example of AI in its infancy, not the sexy ChatGPT version that we see and that my 14-year-old is making images online with. Can you talk a little bit about that journey of time, and from an investment standpoint, this paradox between needing investment quickly but needing time to build true deep AI solutions?
Okay. Yeah, I know we don't like being patient. Like, I know we really want things quite quickly, and I think from the time it came out of research that had been happening for a few years, we are now then, that was like 2015, 2016, 2017, you tech transfer that technology out, it's still a baby. It's still like developing itself. It hasn't gotten the data. We had just started a pilot. The pilot took a long time. Working with auditing, working with a pharmaceutical, like working with pharma data, and then expecting us to know everything. So being able to bring in people with that experience. So I think it took us another year to 2 years to develop that product that we call Maptual, that we're mapping an actual journey of a doctor, creating the right warehousing, creating the right interface, understanding how the user's going to use it. So it wasn't just the wrapping of the multiple algorithms and the different things we had to build and understand. It took a long time to build what was it going to be used and how it was going to be used by that end user. So that multiple year, and now getting to the multiple year of development, and then finally getting to this point and saying, okay, now you can use it. Now you can it's in your hands and we can deploy it. There's still so much more when you're fine-tuning algorithms, and it does take, things do, over how many months into a year, you do need to redefine and redeploy algorithms. Like, this isn't something that just, they're just, oh, you built it once and it's just gonna be. It's like, they are going to drift. They're going to do weird random things, so you're always holding them and nurturing them. So we live in the world of buy versus build. And if you're going to build something in-house, it's gonna cost you millions and millions of dollars. That's how much was invested in us to develop that product that we are now delivering. And I know for a lot of founders, I bet you're hearing, well, why don't I just build it in-house? And you're like, yes, but do you have 80 engineers, product designers, privacy, ethics, data engineers? Do you have UX people? Do you have all these people building specifically for this use case for yourself? And they're like, oh, we got to get all that people. We have a team of 8. And I'm like, good luck with that. we'll co-pilot with you. And I think this is where the ChatGPT, the LLMs, right away we were like experimenting. We were like, how do we create things like this? Executives were saying, do you have LLMs? Do you have things like that? And I go, on pharma data? Okay, we're finally getting to a point where we're comfortable on that experimentation, but it took us a long time. So there's this push and pull, and then everyone expects a lot. On the investment side, they're like, well, why isn't it up and running? You should be selling more. And you're like, yeah, but the reality of buy versus build is the reality of what we're selling into. So for us to deploy into these organizations, we're selling 20 people to 20 stakeholders across an organization, and each one is pulling at us and pulling at themselves, saying, we want this, we want that, no, we can't do that. And so there's a lot of conversations. These are complex things that we're trying to deploy, and I'm really happy with where we're at, because we thought about the user first, and we really thought about the human first. Because if we understand that human need, we can then take our solutions and say what we can build for them. And I think the conversation was a lot more smoother than saying, we do AI, just trust us. I think there was a lot of those kind of conversations.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting because really, like, if you want to innovate, it's a learning process, right? Because you need to do trial and error. So, when you look at, let's say, deep learning really arrived in 2012, but before we really understood how to play with it, it was 2015. So anybody coming to you saying, oh, I got 20 years of experience in deep learning, well, they're lying, right? It's So everybody's stuck in that situation. And we have the same situation right now with Gen AI. There was a joke last December at NeurIP saying that, if you have 8 months of experience in RAG, you consider a senior architect, and you could command a salary for it. And it was 8 months of experience, and you consider senior in a topic. So that gives you the feeling of how fast it's moving. So nevertheless, how do you do that trial and error process rapidly so you could learn rapidly so you don't spend 10 years and spending too much money? So how can you short that period, or you're just playing with it, trying to understand how you're going to fine-tune it to the product that you could make money with, or the service? One aspect that is, I think, most of the time overlooked, and we have that kind of advantage here in Canada, is like, why about getting the university involved? And I know we're opening the can of discussion about the IP and all that discussion, but let's just put the IP aside and say, what about we work as an ecosystem? So that's what we did at BrainBox. We really went out to 6 different universities, and we gave them homeworks. Of course, we had funding from the federal and the provincial to help these students and teachers to do that research work, with really little expectation, except that they're going to learn and they're going to extract information that will be extremely valuable when we're going to assemble the final product. So we ended up doing it at several universities in Quebec, but all the way out to UBC. Unfortunately, nothing with University of Toronto. I'm very sorry about that. And it was really, it helped us to probably shorten something that would have taken 6 years in 2 years. Having all of these teacher and student, which in turn were also learning about deep learning and how to fine-tune it. Something they kept on their side, and I'm sure they're using in their journey today. So it's kind of that ecosystem, and if you start to scale that up, you're going to have something very powerful.
Absolutely. I'm going to come back to the teaching element for Helen in a second, because that's a great segue into how we're engaging with universities. Jean-Simon, staying on the build versus buy, because there are a lot of founders in the room, they're probably getting pressure from their investors, well, AI is a hot topic, you need to embed AI, what are you doing? For BrainBox, it really is an AI company. So for you, building and having engagement with the universities makes a lot of sense, because that is the core of your company. What about for companies that are here that it's not? That's not their end product. They are not an AI company. What is your recommendation to them?
Jump into it. When you listen back to the previous discussion in the previous session, we're at this moment in the history where the wheel of productivity is going to start turning again. So that kind of wheel stopped in the 90s somewhere. It was just too difficult to get more productivity. So that wheel is going to start to move again, and we're going to get productivity gain again. And it's kind of, we're stuck at doing that, right? It's kind of the only way forward, as it was brilliantly presented in the previous session, because you need to have economic growth. And that's the only way you're going to still build that value. So how do you get that productivity gain wheel to move again? It's really the AI tools. Why? Because they give you that margin of optimization that is giving you that productivity gain. They do it by calculating much faster than we do, which are a lot more data than we do, and they give you the answer in real time so you could apply it in real time. So this is really how it's happening. So you need to jump into it. But you don't need to do it all internal. I mean,
right.
There's so many people with knowledge in AI. You have to keep in mind that 3 of the godfather of AI, of deep learning, are Canadian, right? Remember that. So we should be all proud of Canada because we are the inventor of deep learning. Take that home, this is us. People forget that. So how did that come to reality? Because there was a lot of innovation and a lot of push on the science side happening in Canada. Surprisingly, right? It's not all about money. It's about how do you think out of the box and you push the envelope to the next level. So team up with, there's so many, like in Toronto, there's so many cluster of AI in Calgary and Montreal that are just like, will welcome any startups. Let's do research. Let's do the application of the science if it's already published. And how can you create a service and a product? Or how can you bonify something that already exists? If you have the data, there's really only one thing that will prevent you to make it happen is your capacity to brainstorm.
And I think it's a great point around data. I know from an AWS standpoint, I always think about customers that have their data on AWS. I think PitchBook says that 83% of unicorns are using AWS, so they've got their data. Now, how do they turn that into those insights to actually create these AI projects? And you don't have to build. You don't have to create an LLM, your own large language model. You can just use your own data and use pre-existing services that are on the platform. So that's a good, good reminder to folks,
this
right?
example is another jewel that you probably never heard of, which is called Rail Vision Analytics, which is a Canadian startup. Yeah. I don't know if they are on AWS. Yeah. So. First in the world, what have they done? They basically have this co-pilot for the train operator, which is telling the person operating the train at what speed should you run at any segment at any time during your travel from point A to point B. Via Rail is using it now. Via Rail save about 20% of fuel with that little tablet that the driver is following step by step. First in the world. Done here in Canada. Brilliant invention, brilliant innovation. Now they're selling it to all of the rail company in the United States. So it's fascinating, right? That huge United States with all of the tech, they did not put this forward. Yeah. We did in Canada. So there's tons of these little jewels that you see all along the way in Canada that are just waiting to explode and become a success story.
I think it's based on the change management. Okay, like So I think a lot of work that I've been doing the last year to 2 years was a lot of education and change management education. So just because you have an application and you're selling and you're out there talking about it all the time, you notice that you've become an educator. You're going out there and saying, hey, this is how you can deploy it into your organization. These are the people you want to talk to. Let me give you the wording. Let me coach you through this. And that's what happened 2 years ago. That one of our biggest clients we got was because I did an intro to an AI class, and they were in the audience, and I was giving examples of life science that was across like different types of applications in the life sciences using AI. But it was terminology, how to use it, really bringing it down to the basic knowledge of education. So you are becoming the main educator in your organization. As investors, you also need to now become that educator too, to yourselves, to your partners, to your startups. You got to level up to say, how do we deploy an idea that a team is having? How do we suggest things but not sounding like mom and dad? Like, how do we say, hey, have you tried this? There's this weird balance of being this educator and a student, and I know that's one of those life's lessons of you're always learning. You can't stop learning. And now I'm working on my second startup, and all I'm thinking is how I'm coding and what tools I'm using. And I'm like, wow, I am really behind. I gotta really catch up. And I was a judge in San Francisco 2 weeks ago for an OpenAI hackathon, and we had 50 teams, and they were amazing. But it was, again, they're junior teams, and the perspective of the problems that they were working on, we know a lot of the problems. So the question is now this is the time that we can really innovate around, meaning we get intimidated that other people are working on all these problems. There's a lot of tools out there. The question is, how do we innovate and change manage? Meaning, how do we deploy it into these organizations? That is when change happens. That is when we build really strong organizations. So I don't want to say that we all have become like profs. We put our prof hat on and we go out there and tell the client, but we are partners with them. We're telling them why you shouldn't use LLM yet until your data is correct. Or, hey, why don't we work on your warehouse first? You need to become that developer even, the designer, the CEO. You're wearing a lot of hats, but being able to share the knowledge across what you've done with other teams, you're able to level up a lot of teams that are around you that are working in different industries. But I feel like I've seen everything right now in the last few years, and at the end of the day, you might have a great solution, but if it's not on that train being used, or if it's not in an organization, it might be fantastic, it might be amazing, it might be winning papers and getting patents and getting tons of grants, and it might be getting all this stuff that is fabulous and great for media, but if it's not being used by anyone, does it matter? So I think that's kind of my thinking is if people aren't using and understanding, that's why ChatGPT was so successful. Because anyone can go up there and start using it and asking the most stupidest questions or great questions. But at least we can use it. So it's the human first and the usability first versus this is cool and it's shiny. So I think that's kind of when I think about change management, I'm thinking about how we change in our organizations to deploy these technologies, and then it becomes ingrained, and then it becomes normal. So I think that's all I think about when I think about AI.
What are... Oh, you got a clap.
I hope I got a clap. Was that a clap, or was that, Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit then about the challenges that you see as companies are going through this transformation without getting technical, but just staying at that business level of how do you avoid making those mistakes as a company, as a leader within the organization? What advice are you giving to others that are thinking about adopting AI into their business, where AI is not the core of their business?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of magic thinking about AI. AI is just a tool. It's rarely the service or the product you're going to be selling. It's a component of it. And I think people get very excited and they try to play with AI, and then they get stuck into, okay, I got let's say you're doing your training model to give you prediction, and your prediction is super accurate. Bravo. You could open a bottle of champagne about it and brag about it, but you're still not making any money. You're still not creating any value. So what is that prediction will be used for? And that's where people go wow, yeah, but I don't know what am I going to do then. So what is the problem you want to resolve? Will the technology bring enough value that it's going to make a business case or not? And then start very, very small. Do one little part of it. Don't try to boil the ocean from day one. In our case, we started with only one type of equipment and one type of building. It would not have justified to create a company whatsoever. But we say if we make it work with one type of equipment and one type of building, and it's creating that reduction of energy being consumed, Then we'll figure out how to repeat that for other type of equipment and other type of building. And just so stride there, very, very focused, and then move on. You're going to need different component. So think about a different component you're going to need, and be careful that maybe the science is not ready. So what is readily available? The case of Gen AI right now is fascinating, because there's all kind of company trying to do things with Gen AI, and the science is not there yet. So you cannot exceed that limit, right? If you try to do things in your business model that the science has not discovered yet, you're going to fail. So be very careful that you understand where the science is. Good news, the science is moving very quickly. So you could follow that motion, but don't get ahead of it and get onto a hype which is unrealistic.
More time, more money. Expect that you're going to spend a lot more money and a lot more time. I think that's kind of one of the things that I think going through the journey is we expected that, but then I think we had to double it on top, because we realized it was going to take a lot more time, a lot more training, a lot more understanding. Diversifying on talent, I found that we really needed people who were builders versus theorists. I think that was a big thing. So not within, like, we have lots of PhDs on our team, but it's interesting that we have a PhD who is from the pharmaceutical industry, so like he's a pharmacologist. So that is domain expertise. And being able to work with our data scientist and understand the therapeutic is much more valuable than getting another PhD in ML. Like, being able to understand the data at a very deep core level is so much more valuable. So I think expecting more money, and I think that's just across the board with business. It's just gonna cost you more. Things just cost you more. And then I think you're like, we could do that. And you're like, no, we can, but it'll cost more and it'll take more time. So I think I think a lot of the teams that I see never budget enough and never put enough buffer. Like, there's never a buffing time. Like, there's always, it's gonna take you that extra month or 2 months or 3 months. So I think that is where I see a lot of, I think between me and my co-founder, like, me and Philip are always talking about, have we buffered enough time on these things? And I think sometimes we did and sometimes we didn't. And so there was a rush. And so that's when your team really comes through. But I would say, yeah, raise a bit more money and give yourself a bit more time and patience. And if something's not working out, I really suggest reaching out and talking to your advisors. And your team, I would say one of the biggest thing is, if things aren't working out, change your team quickly. You have a good foundation of your team of who you're building with, but don't wait on things. I think that was the biggest thing for me is we can't wait. If things are happening with 3 or 4 months and things are not working, we don't sit on things. Yeah.
And for the investors in the room, any advice you would give to them when they're meeting with companies and deciding to invest, any things they should be looking out for?
Same advice. More time, more money. Give more money. Give more time. No.
I think it's all about, do you have the right people in that team? So do that checklist. And it's not necessarily having like the CV that show that they've done it before, because you're probably trying to do something that was never done before. So, but do they have the right skills? And will they find a way to innovate and team up with whatever expertise they need to beef up the team?
Yeah.
So will they outreach, to your point, when they see that they're missing something? Very often we have this bad habit as human is we try to do it ourselves, right? And we don't reach out for help necessarily. So make sure that this kind of mentality is there, that people will reach out and they will go out and get that kind of ecosystem together that will make it unique and bring forward the solution for the first time in the world. Because we're kind of stuck in that paradigm now, but that's what we're asking the startup, right? We're asking them, like, create this new thing that was never done before. So think about it like, what do you need to make that happen, whatever is the sector you're in? And keep in mind, I mean, like in Montreal, like we got this organization called Mila in AI. They got 1,000 PhD, 1,000 PhD. And they're honestly looking for projects. Their appetite is infinite. That's the same size as the MIT research team. So when we keep talking about MIT being, oh, yeah, it's another spun-off of MIT, another spun-off of MIT, and we feel that we are kind of checkmate in front of that equation. We're not. We could do the same thing if we play our card right. So put your money at work with the right team and make sure they team up with the right people, because we have them in Canada, and you're going to be world first again and again and again.
I think it's
Helen,
those
can you comment on that from a U of T perspective and the students that you're working with?
Well, I think, because I was there for a lot of tech transfer and supporting teams that were transferring out of the university, and having amazing investors who would come in, from Mars IF, from our U-Test program, our CDL. I'm looking at Lance over there from Graphite. He was there from the beginning when we were working on coming out of the university. I think there was an appetite that we didn't have a pilot. We didn't have concrete things. We were the team. When I brought on my co-founder, we had two academics, me, and then I was like, we really do need a senior startup founder. I reached out to a lot of advisors. I encourage all the teams that I work with at the university to reach out to advisors and talk to people and say, how did you build your startup? How did you create something? What were your steps? And then realizing that person you're reaching out to might be like, hey, you know what? I have one more startup in me. And I was like, you do? Oh, okay, let's do this, And so having someone who was on, had two other startups before, this would be their third, so I could get up that mountain quite quicker. That was my goal. Like, I wanted speed, I wanted to get out there, I didn't want to get into this pilot of death. Aside that proof of concept, proof of value is a normal part of business, but I didn't want to get caught in research projects, and I think a lot of our PhDs get caught up in these research, and the mentality of understanding, like, to me, I knew we had to make that business case, we had to make the business, because no one pays for just tech. They need to see how it's going to give them ROI or whatever value you're giving. That is risky when you put in those first checks. And we had a few great angels, like Amar Varma, who put in checks. We had a lot of different angels who came in and gave us checks. And we're there right away because they were founders. They had gone through these things, but they loved our team. And I think that when we talk about team and who really propelled, it didn't matter what their problem was going to be and what they were working on. They're going to figure it out. Now being a now I'm like, as a founder of a second company, I'm thinking, what does it mean to create the next, who do I bring together? How do I create this? It's exciting, it's scary, but then you're thinking, wait a minute, who is going to be my first checks? How will I build that relationship? Because they're going to get me through the 10 years, right? They're going to get me through building. I think as first founders in the room, these are relationships you're having for a very long time. And the question is, if you can't stand them for 15 minutes and a coffee, but you want their money, you shouldn't hang out with them. Just so you know, because it's going to be these long conversations. And when you're having a bad day or your quarter didn't go well, and they're not there behind you going, you can do this. Okay, how do we tweak this? How do we support you? If you don't have those people behind you, I don't think we could get to this point in our company. I think that's the biggest thing is these are relationships. And I don't want to call them marriages because I don't like bringing family stuff, but they do feel a little bit like that. You're like, oh my gosh. And so it's a weird relationship you're going to have with your founders, but do you believe in the team? Things are going to change. Things will data will change. Industries will change. I think you saw every industry we did. We did everything. We did lighting. We did tons of different types of industries. But that support from our investors were really important. I think that was the most important thing.
I think the biggest challenge we had at BrainBox when people ask me, it was not like train a model, right? It was making a mechanical engineer, which is, these are the boiler and the pump guys, working with a computer engineer, working with a PhD in AI, which is a pure mathematic person, right? And really, these people, you put them in a room, if you don't really manage it, it's not going to work. All right, it's just not going to work. Like the first question the PhD person asked was like, why do we put a pump in a building? Like, I don't understand. It makes no sense. So making these people work together and merging their world and their silo together, then you start to create things.
That's magic.
It's the magic.
It's magic, yeah. That's magic, not the,
I should probably open it up to questions then, because we've got 5 minutes left. Any questions from the room?
Oh, there's one here. Oh. I think it's interesting when those PhDs, that is a really hard one, I think. That's a really hard thing to tackle, is changing mindsets. I think the biggest thing we had was if I write more papers, and I'm like, papers don't get us customers. Yeah.
That's so I always get that, but I need to publish, I need a paper.
Do we go to NERPs again?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, the parties are great. The AWS parties are awesome at NERPs. I'll just say that,
Yeah, publish or perish.
Yeah,
they keep bringing
perish,
okay.
yeah.
Hello. Thank you very much for all of the remarks. So I'm here on the founder side, and we are in the space of AI and health tech right now. So before I go into a little bit of what we do, I wanted to say, Helen, thank you for advocating for give us time and give us more money. Just because when you're in the space and you know the difference with generative AI and deep learning, and you know the intricacies of what you've elaborated on, it's really nice to be able to have that advocacy to the people that we need to talk to. So I wanted to say that I sincerely appreciated that. I have a question on what you can offer, both of you, as advice to the investors that potentially might be here if they're going to be entertaining conversations with companies such as myself. Because quickly, to offer context, they talked about learning language models. And so if you're in the space of trying to build something that could be a learning movement model, you need to collect data. You need to collect so much data. And with generative AI and ChatGPT, we're seeing the application of what happens when you have the data. So when you're trying to be extremely ambitious and you have that team that's saying, okay, what if we could do that, but for human movement? You now need to start collecting so much data. So our team has some people in Europe right now. We've gotten Finland also interested to start sharing some data. If anyone wants to look up Cerner, C-E-R-N-E-R, there's a company that has navigated this. They got acquired by Oracle. What they've done in about 20 years, we have now figured out in 3.5 years. So we're moving quickly, but there's this notion of we need more data and we need more time. So then, as you've also mentioned, we need to present the business case of, okay, well, if you do give us money now, this is what we can do with as far as we've gotten. So we've navigated that space, but how can you help us articulate to investors of, this is where we're going, though. So you need to have more patience with us, and that your understanding of the business model and the business case isn't applicable to us. Because if the FDA is saying, oh, maybe let's look at how we do regulation, and if HIPAA and GDPR, they're also saying, oh, okay, well, maybe we need to reconsider this. How can we give you the standard answers that you're used to seeing if those standard answers are starting to not apply to the space that we're in? How can you help us remedy that conversation with investors?
Health tech is really hard. And congratulations for being a female founder. Thank you for even trying that. I got really excited when you thought about movement, and especially around understanding and using computer vision and understanding like what people have moving. This is the future. So I think when we were talking about, if you want to be an investor who goes, oh, I wish I had invested in, give me any startup, like Shopify, if I was there for the early stage. Everybody thought a lot of things were risky, including around, investing in Cohere or investing in OpenAI, the question is, it is hard, I would say, like, how do I coach these people to start giving you money? If you want to invest in the teams that are going to slowly move out and seem really stable, and they're in great little industries. I don't want to say little, sorry. In large industries, but they're in the usual industries that have to change. You're like, okay, I can see a stable push out into this industry. But if you want to be a visionary industry, like a visionary investor, that's where we talk about risk. That's where we have to lower that idea that we have to be risky. And say, if we invest in this type of technology, you're investing in something really looking into the future. Are you ready for that? If they're not ready for that, you shouldn't even be talking to them. Put them in your CRM and then just push them down a bit and be like, no vision. Or vision in Series A, right? So this is all calculated. This is all numbers. We want the visionary founders that are around you. The visionary investors, right? I get real excited about when you start talking about technology and moving on, and watching movement in human bodies. This is the future. Being able to watch these things is going to be the next change in AI. It's the multimodal thinking, right? And if you're not investing in multimodal startups that are thinking about the multiple different ways of understanding humans, from movement to seeing, to understanding and reasoning, to just everything that might happen around a human, and you're tracking that, you are one part of a whole system. If you're not investing in really risky parts of that AI, then invest in teams that invest later. You can't fault people for wanting a certain type of traction. I invest a lot in teams like Private AI and Patricia, because one, I love the founders. And two is cybersecurity. Like, hello, strong female founders who are working on a really hard problem. You're working on a really hard problem. You seem like a really awesome founder. How do we support you? I think that's it. There's no issue for me here. Your delta will change. Your delta of change of changing the tech will show itself. It's data. It's always been data. That's why we have PhDs who just are thriving and dying for data sets, right? And so I think finding investors who like that risk, I think that's it. And then move them up the chain, like move them around, put them in your CRM and say, or your personal CRM, and put them in and say, okay, you know what, they're a bit more at the Series A or Series B kind of founder. But we're in a room of angels. And if they want change, if they want to be part of that early, interesting technology, they should be investing in you. So she's right there. Your name? Patricia is sitting right there doing some really cool work. I expect to see checks flying across the room. I also don't want to see due diligence that takes a year. Okay, that's what freaked me out with the Dragon's Den. When there was a comment about due diligence a year after that show. I understand it's TV, but due diligence, like 3-4 months of due diligence.
Traumatic.
Yeah, it's very traumatic. It's triggering.
Yeah,
it's very triggering.
All right, I think Chantal is giving us the plug.
Yes.
But
Sorry, I just.
Good, all good.